Welcome to Take Two, a discussion of the times and current events. I'm joined as always by Adam Matlack and Mike Pomerantz. Today our question is, can libertarianism exist in a time of international crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I am. Uh, this is the time when we're supposed to be taking care of each other and having a lot of open-mindedness towards other people's point of views. But at the moment, when I see the condition of the world, and maybe this is not the right time to make this evaluation, but I gotta believe more than ever this exposes the limits of a, and I'll say that theoretical way that people can conduct themselves in society. I think that in the best of times, libertarianism is it is a concept that is used by people who have found success in life in order to uh, get away from any kind of regulation. Once you've got yours, you should be able to do whatever you want to keep yours. And it applies to a pretty narrow group of people who are not looking for corporate socialism, which is not only rampant now, but is a condition of our daily existence in this country going back 40, 50 years, if not longer. But it, so my question to libertarians is always, where's the limit? Like, it's okay for everybody else to follow the law just as long as I don't follow the law. That's usually what the conversation devolves into. But in this context, I think it's especially important, and especially it's like stark relief. You can't have everybody fending for themselves. And to be fair, libertarians take safety seriously and the responsibility of government in terms of national security seriously. I never found someone who said, "Look, you just throw off uh, all of the bounds of society and all of the rules have to get flushed down the toilet because freedom is the only thing that matters." I've never really found a libertarian to take it that far. But in this time, how can you allow, especially today, it's was it March 31st, and to a certain extent, we're seeing a very slight reduction in the speed at which things are getting worse. Why is that? It's because social distancing has been imposed on us by our governmental overlords. And to a certain extent, that's antithetical to the libertarian model. Now, I'm not saying the libertarian model is whoever dies, dies, whoever lives, lives, and that's just the way it goes. But it's closer to that kind of excessive Darwinism than what we have now. And look, I never heard of social distancing until, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I didn't know about this, but this is a thing that smart people know about. And if it works, and it looks like it's working, then that knowledge should be shared with everybody so that everybody has an opportunity to do the right thing. And I fear, and I'll hold off on this, but I fear that to a certain extent, libertarianism is just an excuse for somebody to say, look, I don't want to have to do what anyone tells me. I don't want to have to do with my finances what people tell me. I don't want to have to do with my movement through society what people tell me. I am the person who should be in charge of my life, and I should get to make those decisions exclusively. And any effort to curtail that freedom is is tyranny. So, you know, Adam, take me to school now. I just think um, it's almost more of a religion. It's almost more of an aspirational um, ideal that we might strive for. But when we talk about practicality and we talk about safety, we know that we can never fully get there. But let me hear the other take.
Okay. So, question being, does libertarian exist, or can it exist in a time of crisis? And where we're at now, I think most people would agree it's a time of crisis. I think it shines. I think libertarianism shines in this scenario. I think the people who are libertarians who take it seriously, who actually believe it, right? There's a huge difference between people who talk about libertarianism as ideals and hold it up as an idealistic viewpoint and talk a little bit about it. They really, most of them are really just kind of most of the time a little conservative, ultra conservative, perhaps. Don't want. I think some of them fit into the form that you were just talking about. This idea that I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to conform, and I don't want to be forced to do anything. So I think real libertarians really aren't affected by what's going on. Second of all, though, go back to the social distancing question. I actually don't agree in any capacity because I don't think the government's forcing people to do social distancing. I think they're 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 trying to claim that they have the authority to do X, Y, and Z, but in so many cases they don't have the authority, and it's just a head fake to try to trick people into not doing whatever they want and to follow these guidelines or rules, which is something most of these governments that are really inept in many ways end up doing. They pretend as though they have the power to exercise this like chokehold on movement or prevent people from going where they want or leaving, all these things. As far as I'm concerned, right now, like what's happening, the people leaving from New York who are driving to going into Rhode Island who are being stopped, uh, there's massive amounts of trampling of the Constitution going right now in the name of greater good. And this is the reason why libertarianism exists, because the slippery slope is real. The moment it's not so much that when you tell me that there's a tax on my soft drink because it's a fat tax, that oh no, it's tyranny. It's not so much that, it's that it's really close, one step away from telling me that I'm not allowed to have that drink. And so it's utter fear of some reality that you're sitting there saying, oh okay, I'm gonna wake up one day and like they're gonna take just a little, I'm gonna give just a little, and then they're gonna take the whole thing. And that's the fear in my rationale, is sitting there being like, oh well, I don't want constitutionalism or the Constitution for that matter to be trampled in any way. I don't want habeas corpus to ever be suspended. I don't want these. I don't want the rules to ever change, because in liberty, in terms of my autonomy, is that I'm sitting there saying, oh well, I'm going to take care of me, and I'm not going to rely on other people. Not going to count on them. So, in a crisis like now, I think libertarianism, true libertarianism, actually shines.
So I wonder if you could go back to my thing about knowledge, and this is back when I practiced law, you could make a deal with someone, you could enter into a contract with someone, and pretty much you're on your own. And if the one person, like a landlord, has a tremendous amount of knowledge and doesn't disclose it, the other person in this contract, the tenant, might be in a situation that's incredibly unsafe. So what we did was we enacted lead paint laws and other disclosure laws, the kind of regulation that adds friction to business. But it was deemed socially acceptable, and it was passed through houses of legislation because of the difference in knowledge. Now, I live in a place where I can see very closely the neighbors on either side. Probably just about 10 or 15 feet between houses. So the houses are not attached. But if I knew that someone was bringing their family from New York City surreptitiously into the house next door, I might act in a certain way. But I don't have the ability to obtain that knowledge. Whereas the government, because of tolls and turnpikes and surveillance, may have that knowledge. Should they, is my question, if you lived in a situation like I do, where your neighbors are potentially within the zone where they could spread the virus to you, and they've made a conscious decision to disrespect social distancing, which I agree, very hard to really enforce it on a house by house basis. Although your concern about what's going on in Rhode Island is a example of it, at least an attempt to do that. So would you want to have that knowledge in order to inform how you would respond to people coming in saying, look, I'm not going to obey social distancing. I'm going to go next door to Pomerantz, and, you know, if he or his family gets sick, like, that's too bad. We didn't want to be in New York. That place was bad news.
Yeah. So, yes, I'd absolutely want that. If I was in a situation where I actually had the ability to, or was in a limited government situation, I would know my neighbors a lot better than I do right now. I would actually know them very well, and I would probably have agreements with them. We would probably have a gate on our street where we wouldn't even let people in unless. So if I lived in the community as I do now, which is this kind of subdivision slash, cul-de-sac, I would 100% not only know all these people, I would enter into agreements with them to share and keep those, the rules that we decide and agree upon. And we would even fence it off. I would straight up fence it off and not let anybody else in unless somebody agrees upon it and all these other things. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, let's go back. Let's go back to the lead paint. I love the lead paint. Let's talk about it, right? Because this is the protectionism that's supposed to be protecting us, right? However, I know so many people who have been taken advantage of in today's world, in today's situation where there's mildew, there's mold, there's all sorts of issues that are going on inside the house that they don't fix or they don't disclose. And the buyer is under the distinct impression that the government has put things into place that prevents this from taking place. And yet it doesn't stop these people from doing this. It doesn't prevent anything. And in most cases, it gives people a false sense of protection that's just not real at all. And so I literally know people who have asthma. Their kids have asthma from being in mold, from being in mildew, from being in like slum situations. And the government prevented none of it. And not only that, the situation's bad. And so if they were in a situation where they don't know, right, there's no protections in place, one of the biggest things that would be sold to people would be an at-home test kit for all the things that are concerning. You would check it. You would be responsible for it. You would assume nothing going into that sale. And yeah, we would have, the market would provide, in my opinion, all sorts of things, because I know I would either make one or I would buy one to figure out I would try to get the information. And to assume that the government is going to help try to enforce that sharing of fair information is just nuts. That's not going to happen at all. So in terms of the rules, in terms of how it breaks down, I just don't see in any way, shape, or form, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond to this because I know it's like, but I just don't see it in any way really having an impact other than a negative one.
Well, this, I think, feeds into the concern I have about the aspirational, sort of almost theological shape of libertarian thought today, that it is not in any way, shape, or form practical. It takes as its starting point that there will be a complete reshaping of the concept about regulation for every American. I mean, we've talked about this before, where is the movement? How soon is that going to happen? Who is going to be the avatar that brings the public this message? And, it's one thing we talk about Bernie Sanders and socialism. You could say he's into socialism or it's some other version of it, but, he is making a case. I don't hear anybody making a case for the kind of radical change that you're suggesting. Now, let me just throw out another one for you to get your reaction to this. We were talking about it a little bit before we started to roll, and that is the government intervention in these mass gatherings that are for religious purposes. They're peaceable gatherings. They're gatherings for religious purposes. In other words, how many different ways can the government violate the First Amendment? And yet, and I'm just going from my gut. I mean, I haven't done a Medium article on this or engaged in any deep thought, but my feeling is these people need to be saved from themselves. And so I'm trying to understand what you do with these pastors who say, look, God will protect us. coronavirus will be solved by prayer, and let's all come together and pray together to increase the strength of our prayer. I mean, do you see that as irresponsible?
Oh, absolutely. I see it as irresponsible. That's not even a hard thing to answer. Of course, like if they're not following these, like a guideline is a good word for it. Look, the social distancing stuff, anybody who has a brain on their shoulders is going to realize that they need to keep their distance, and not just for them, it's for other people. Look, there's a lot more collectivism in libertarianism than people want to admit. It's just voluntary. It's not forced. And so this idea that, libertarianism is less communal, it's actually more. It's way more communal. It requires, for it to function, for there to be roads. If the government doesn't build them, there were roads before the government started building them, right? Those existed.
That's true.
It took a lot more by the community. The community did it. The community organized it. And so it took different types. It was a different type of government. And I agree with you that, the libertarian, you can see the memes. The memes exist. You got libertarian ideas, and it's like this guy in a suit, and then you got libertarian candidates, and it's a scrunched up fox that's looks like he's on crack. I mean, it's literally that bad. These people who prescribe to these ideas and think about this, they're like, oh, the people who try to communicate it are incredibly bad at it. And not only that, they're idealistic beyond belief. So, but I want to make sure that I address this idea that, like, it is completely not okay with me in any way, shape, or form that the government, any state, local, federal, is intervening and preventing people from meeting in a religious manner. I don't care how stupid they are. I don't care how dangerous it is in terms of their well-being. And this idea that the government is going to save people from themselves is the most scary thing. Reagan wasn't right about everything, but he was right about one thing. The 9 scariest words in the English language are absolutely, I'm here, or I'm from the government and I'm here to help. It is a complete, utter disaster whenever they get involved. I can literally look at FEMA and everything they've ever done and basically laugh until I cry because it's that sad. And so, it's a perfect example of the scary times we live in my opinion, that church and how important religion is in this country, and the protection of that, and that it's being suspended in any manner for any reason is incredible. It's unprecedented as far as I'm concerned, and it's very dangerous.
So, are there any circumstances, and I feel like if such circumstances could exist, we're either there or we're about to get there now, but are there any circumstances where in a libertarian society we would say, at least with regard to some fundamental rights, that those rights need to be suspended? Forget for the moment that we can't always agree on what constitutes a fundamental right, but stepping back and thinking about the deal we make, or we're supposed to have made with government. And, I am a guy who will tell you that I think government actors, to an alarming extent, and perhaps even to a majority extent, are bought and sold. And that is just completely against what we want. Anybody who gets involved in politics is usually doing it for the power, they're doing it for the money, and the more we have open eyes about that situation, the better off and the safer we'll all be. But with that in mind, the idea is still that these people are our representatives, and that they would make decisions on our behalf about implementing what we, the people, want, as opposed to the people just kind of coming together, organizing themselves to provide for things like education, sanitation, to sort of make a more informal social contract. And how, if you don't have regulation, how do you address dangerous behavior? How do you stop people from acting against the collective need? I agree that libertarianism in its finest expression does have that. The idea, and I really have quizzed people on this, the idea of me having the greatest chance to achieve my greatest self, my greatest wealth, the greatest happiness for my family, always is going to include a cooperative understanding of how I can help other people and how they can help me. And that is embedded in libertarianism. So I am very aware of that. But man, what do you do when somebody just decides I'm going to game the system and I'm going to take advantage of these rubes who talk about how it's good to be a good neighbor and it's good to help people out? They're weak. They're weak. I am going to come along and I am going to trample these people because their ideals make them vulnerable and my lack of morality makes me strong. In a libertarian society, how do you stop that from happening? Because it doesn't have to be a groundswell of people. It could be one person. It could be a small group of people. And they take advantage of, a very compelling sense of humanity that it seems like you have.
I get it. But my argument would be is that that's happening now. You can't say that that's not happening now. You can't say I'm just saying you get robocalled 5 times a day trying to get you to give them your social security number or some credit card thing, and there's a reason why those are happening. It's because there's enough rubes a day are giving them the information and giving it away because they're like, oh no, there's a warrant out for my arrest, or oh no, the IRS is suing me, or oh no, this machine is telling me if I don't give them the last $3,000 in my checking account, I am going to die. And so this is happening now because they are under the distinct belief that they are being protected by some big, magical, fat, overweight, disgusting blob of a government that is inept and completely incapable of actually protecting people. I think that there are downsides to everything, and this is the downside. I think when you look at libertarianism, you're sitting there saying, oh, okay, if we're going to have this free, open society, what is the downside? The downside is buyer beware, seller beware. At every turn, you might be getting tricked because there's not a lot of certifications or let's call them licensing, because I think certification is a libertarian principle. The idea that you can be certified, that there'd be boards and there would be systems and saying, hey, we certify this and these are people, and that would happen, and it would be private. It wouldn't be a license. We wouldn't need a license to operate. Anybody could sit there and be like, I can fix cars. I can cut hair. I don't need to be told. I don't need to have a badge, and I certainly don't need to pay $600 to have a license to be able to tell you that I can cut your hair. And you can engage in that with me on record, or you could go to the one who's certified by a company that says this is what we do, and instead of it being done by the government, it would be actually a real service who are actually upholded to their customer base and their people around there, and if they certify somebody, they go out of business. And yet if the government certifies somebody in there shouldn't have, nothing happens. There's zero accountability. So one is where we live now, where the government has no accountability. At every turn, it grabs more and more. It grows now. Literally, as we speak, as they take away freedoms, as they take away liberties right now, they are literally making it more of a police state, and they're marching closer and closer to something and somewhere that I don't want to live. And so as dark as that sounds, it's the reality is, in my opinion, that as we move closer to this state where it's for the greater good, you've got to ask yourself, what exactly are you willing to give up? And if you're the guy who's trying to leave New York and somebody pulls you over with absolutely no probable cause and tells you that you have to go to quarantine because of where you came from, I've got to tell you something right now. I would not. I wouldn't even stop. I wouldn't even get out of the car. And I gotta be honest, I don't think I'd let them take me or anyone in my family. It would literally, hopefully not be a shootout, but it probably would be if that's how far they wanted to go. Because we live in America still. And regardless of how scared everybody is, it doesn't give people the right to take away our God-given right to exist, to be free, and to do these things. And so it's scary times.
All right, with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thanks for your thoughts, gentlemen. If you enjoyed our discussion, please be sure to like and subscribe below and join us for another edition of Take Two.